on my computer.
That was a
All right, all right. Good evening, fellow commissioners, members of the public who are here. It is Thursday, April 16th at 5:30, and it is the regular meeting of Measure J Commission. Let me call the meeting to order. And Melissa, can you do a roll call, please?
Yes. Commissioner Cabreros,
Present.
Commissioner Davis, Commissioner Isaac,
Present.
Commissioner Hopkins,
Present.
Commissioner Newby,
Present.
Commissioner Travis,
Present.
Commissioner Thigpen has an excuse absence for tonight. Vice Chair Kravitz,
Here.
Chair Sipkins.
Here. The next item on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. Let's stand and face the flag, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is item number 4, the acceptance of the agenda. The Measure J Commission will discuss the order of the agenda and may amend the order, add items, and may remove items from the agenda for discussion. The agenda is in, of course, the book. Does anybody have any items that they would like to either amend, add, or remove? If not, can I have a motion to accept the agenda, please?
So moved.
Thank you. I have a second.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
The agenda is accepted. The next item is the approval of minutes of March 19, 2026. Those minutes are also in your folders, in your books. Again, I will ask, does anybody have any items that they would like to either add to, or modify, or otherwise change in the minutes of last month's meeting? If not, can I have a motion to approve those minutes?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes and the minutes are approved. Thank you, Melissa. Next item is item number 6, public comment. This time has been set aside for members of the public to address the Measure J Commission on agenda items and items of general interest within the subject matter jurisdiction of this commission. Although the commission values your comments pursuant to the Brown Act, it generally cannot take any action on items not listed on the posted agenda. 3 minutes are assigned to each speaker. Do we have any public comment tonight?
We do not.
The next item on the agenda, item number 7, are welcome comments from me as the chair of the commission, and I have some very brief comments. First, I think in order, at least in my own mind of priority, is to let everyone on the commission know, remind you perhaps, is that there are 2 weeks left for commissioners whose terms expire at the end of June to reapply, and a reapplication is required, to reapply so that they can continue to serve a second, third, 3-year term. Each of us is entitled to a maximum of 6 years on the commission without taking a year of vacancy and off the commission. So I have enjoyed working with all of the commissioners over the past several years, and I encourage those of you who would like to stay on the commission to reapply. I think it would be great to have you all re-up, if you could. Secondly, we are now 10 months into the fiscal year, and as all of you on the commission know, our responsibilities have somewhat dramatically changed over the course of this year compared to last fiscal year, where we basically approved the expenditure and funding of a number of projects. This year, we've switched into an oversight role as required by the ordinance. We're 10 months into this fiscal year, and I have not heard any reports from any commissioners about their oversight. And I think that one of our responsibilities is to come back to this commission and just at meetings and to say, I happen to stop by a certain project that I have some required responsibility for, and I want you to know that construction is underway. I have reviewed that construction, or I've met with the people who are the owners of the project, and it seems to be on schedule, or it may require additional funding, or it's going to be overfunded. But at least we need to have some reports. I know that Commissioner Travis and I both have had tours of at least one facility. It was extremely interesting and educational. Construction has not yet started on that project, so we can't report on it, but at least we were there. I was at the ribbon cutting for Tockwitz River project about a week or two ago, and I was at the dedication of the 4 art installations on Wednesday here at City Hall, and I was the only one of the commissioners that appeared at either of those. So I would encourage you all, when there are Measure J installations that are being honored or recognized by the city, and the city council and the city staff show up, it's important for us to be there and show some presence. Finally, last month, we were visited concerning the $250,000 loan that we approved earlier this year to the Public Arts Commission. And at last month's meeting, both the chair of that commission, Gary Armstrong, and the administrative person assigned to that commission, Jay Verrata, appeared here and asked for $100,000 forgiveness of that loan. We discussed it briefly, and I think decided that it was premature for us to make any decisions on that. I have had several meetings with Chair Armstrong since that last meeting. I think he agrees that it's necessary that we have some permanent recognition. I don't know how many of you saw in the Palm Springs Post today. There have been 4 art installations, and there are 4 very flimsy paper signs recognizing Measure J's contribution. So I would encourage the Palm Springs Publicity Group to come up with a design so that we can present it to the Public Arts Commission, that we can approve what it's going to look like, and then we can get some facts and figures about how much it's going to cost to put permanent installations on those 4 art pieces that were dedicated last week. So I think that this is an item we cannot vote on tonight. It's not on the agenda, but it's something that we should put on the agenda and discuss next month. And that concludes my comments as the chair. The next item is new business, and that we have the Palm Springs Convention Center update. I have heard several of these, and they're fascinating, so I encourage you all to pay attention and listen, because it's a fascinating project. All right, so we're now up to new business 8A, Palm Springs Convention Center update.
Thanks, Chair. Appreciate it. Yeah, so tonight, just like we've done for the past few meetings, we're going to provide sort of an update on the convention center. I'd like to invite up Scott White from Visit Greater Palm Springs and our Chief Economic Development Officer, Wayne Olson. Wayne's going to help me out with the presentation. Really appreciate Scott coming tonight. You know, as we noticed with Carolina from Visit Greater Palm Springs was here a couple of months ago, she provided a wealth of information about just tourism in general and how that impacts, you know, the valley and about the project itself. So Scott will be here for all those questions again, and maybe I might ask him if he could say a few words about the project and its benefit to the valley once we get completed. But I just really appreciate you being here, Scott, and thank you to Wayne. Wayne's going to help out with the presentation as well. We're going to do the presentation, and then that will prompt us to move right into the agenda item B. I'll let you announce it, Chair, of course. But we're going to talk a lot about numbers tonight, as promised. We're going to give you the first look into what we anticipate, what we're going to ask of the commission to vote on in the May meeting about how much support Measure J is going to, we want Measure J to support this project. I do want to note that Measure J is not the only source of funding for this project. It's anticipated that in future years, the general fund will also support this project, and in future years, the Tourism Improvement District, which we are currently attempting to put in place, will also have a role in funding this project as well. So we'll get into some of those numbers here in a little bit. We'll start off with the first slide of the presentation, which just talks about outreach. We just want to let the commission know everything that, and this effort was really led by our consultants, Daily Strategies. We wanted, this is such an important project and such a big project. I mean, it's 135 million. Some say 125, some say 135. We're going to call it 135. Of course, those numbers are still being ironed out, but it's such a big project and it's so important to the community. We wanted to just show you everything that all these organizations that we've met with, are elected officials that we've met with, government bodies. We've met with the tribe, the small hotel, Veron, PS Resorts, all a part of this outreach. And you can see where we're going to be going in the future as well. So the outreach to get this project out into the community, to make it known to all the stakeholders has been huge. It's been ongoing for over a year, and it's going to continue. There's another big meeting with stakeholders at the end of this month that we're going to have all the architects that are on board be there. Council members have been involved. So it's a huge project, and this just sort of tells, how important this project is to the city and where we've gone to get that message out about the importance of the project. So I just wanted to make that clear. We'll move on to the next slide. So here's some numbers. So, when it says preliminary financing overview, this is a preliminary financing overview. We have got some numbers that we think is going to happen. I do anticipate these will change. I don't anticipate the total project cost going up. I think the total project cost is going to stay where it's at. We've made it known to the architects and the design teams that this is the money that we have. We don't have any more than, what we're budgeting, what we're setting aside. So you can see in the first column there how much the city is going to be supporting. And again, this is not all Measure J support, but a lot of it is Measure J support. To the tune of $97.1 million, we're expecting the city to support. And then the TID, the Tourism Improvement District, we're anticipating and hopeful that will be approved by the City Council in a few meetings. And so if that does get approved, we're looking at almost $38 million for the Tourism Improvement District to contribute. And just as a reminder, the Tourism Improvement District is made up of hotels and short-term vacation rentals who are going to self-assess themselves 1% of the gross room rental rate. That amount is supposed to be, or estimated to be, about $4.1 million. Oh, let me go back one quick note on the city funding. So we've talked a little bit about the project. We talk about it in stages, but really the project's going to be sort of one big project that's just going to move forward. Phase one is a lot of different, close to 30 different projects, like renovating the kitchen, renovating the roof, carpet, technology, all this kind of stuff that the convention center needs today just to keep up with other convention centers and keep the building fresh. That stage one funding is largely going to be supported all by Measure J. We're hopeful that the commission will agree with that. So as you see, the $32.5 million for city, $10 million for the TID. I don't know at this point if it's going to work like this. The Measure J fund we may ask to support the entire $42.5 million. We're still kind of working through some of these numbers. Stage two is an expansion. Almost $60 million where they're going to expand the east side of the building, where the big parking lot is. It's going to allow for not just one major conference, but two major conferences to be held at the convention center at the same time. That's big. That's a lot more room nights and and everything that goes along with having these large conventions. And then the third stage, which is really part of stage two, and the thing that everybody's really excited about and really, want to see how this is going to work, is the connectivity. And as Commissioner Travis knows, he's worked on some stuff like this in the past, and so he probably has an idea more than the rest of us of how this is going to work. But it's going to be really exciting to see how the convention center ties into the downtown area, where we can get those conventioners rolling into downtown to visit all of our restaurants and all of our business downtown. So that's really big, and everybody's excited about it, and everybody wants to see where that is going to lead and what that's going to look like. And we've seen some renderings of some drawings of other cities that have had this, and it's really cool. So I'm excited. We're all excited to see how it's going to work. Okay, so here's the way we're looking at Measure J's funding. So in these early years, so first of all, the commission should know that that general fund number of 4.7 million, that is that's debt that was issued way back in early 2000 that has been funded or refunded over a couple of times over years. So that money, so we're still paying for some of those early renovations to the convention center back in early 2000. And so that comes out of the general fund, 4.7 million. That debt ends, I think, in 2034. And so in 2034, and then after that, we expect the general fund to continue to contribute to the debt service of the convention center. And that's the way we have it now. Of course, that's 10 years down the road, and that very well could change. But so the total debt service in these early years for the new debt that we want to issue and the old debt is 9.9 million. And so that's the general fund and Measure J picking up pieces of that pie. That will go all the way through to 2035 when the debt service smooths out a little bit, and you can see the 7.9 million, of which 4.7 will be taken over by the general fund, and Measure J's support gets reduced to 3.2 since the general fund is going to be picking up some of that additional debt service. This is the TID portion. I think it's important, even though Measure J isn't going to the TID is going to be a standalone entity. It's important to see what the TID is going to contribute. We think that $38 million in debt that the TID is going to issue is going to result in about $2.6 million of debt service annually. There is some administrative fees that the Tourism Improvement District will have to pay out. It's things for like My Team's collections and for just annual reporting that has to be done. And then the exciting part of this is what's left over we want to set aside for capital reserves. So future convention center capital improvements, future maintenance, so that in 30 years from now, we don't have to issue another round of $135 million of debt, that we're keeping the building fresh and we're keeping everything upgraded. So Conventional Wisdom, who's one of our consultants, and their team is going to provide the city or the convention center with a program that will say every 5 years you need a carpet refresh, or every 10 years you need a technology upgrade. And so this will help us, the city, and it'll help the convention center be able to do those things that are needed from a convention center to keep it fresh and to keep us out there for all these big conventions that we're hoping that comes to the city. So that's a very important piece. And we're excited to see that the TID is going to have a real big part in continuing to keep the building fresh. And then I think this is our Chief Economic Development Officer's slide, so I'm going to turn it over to Wayne Olson.
Thank you.
And thanks, Wayne.
Commission, thank you so much. First off, thank you again for considering these numbers that we're bringing forward tonight. Chris and I worked very closely on this. I believe we were here a little earlier last year, maybe around this time, to get the preliminary idea of the project off the ground. But the big arc was, before I got here, I started in 2024, Convention Sports and Leisure and the Convention Center pulled together a study that looked at the future of the Convention Center. What do we need to do to keep our conventioneers coming to our front door and to continue to spend in downtown? The slides I'll show you are brief. Chris asked me to keep it brief. But following that, then I and Rob Hampton, who is the outgoing GM, he's retiring at the end of April, and Karen Turturro is our new GM. She's got a couple members of her team. She's quickly picking up the pace and getting up to speed on the incoming, or the new project. We put together a capital program, which is essentially laying out all of the projects that were needed to renew and meet the terms of this new future study. That was about 8 years long and about $96 million, I think, at the time we looked at it. We took that to the council, and the council said, we don't want to wait 8 years, we want to do it in 3. So Chris and I said, okay, we got to figure out how to pay for this in 3, and we got to get the team assembled. So over the past year, we've been assembling that team. We now have at least 4 or maybe 5 consultants. The first one is Conventional Wisdom, who is a international consulting firm on conventions. They've done over 300 convention centers worldwide. They did Austin. You probably read off the list better than I, but they're in a lot of different communities in and around the U.S. and elsewhere. We have Melk Studios, who is out of New York, who is a worldwide urban planning firm. They are looking at the connectivity, which is really the broader urban fabric around the convention center. We've all been to conventions where you get to and from easily and you can tell where you're going. Here, we don't do that so well yet. This is going to address that, and Melk is working hard on that. Multi-Studio is a firm out of the Phoenix area. They understand the deserts out west. They're going to help us brand and market the district as that gets developed. And then we have LMN, and I think, is Lance O'Donnell here? He has a local firm, O2, so it's LMN O2, and they're a firm out of Seattle and do convention centers again across the U.S. and North America. So we've got this really strong team, and then Daily Strategies, of course, helping us understand how this project should come together. So I won't spend too much time on these. Thank you.
Maybe it's just not connected for you. Nope, maybe lost it.
Gonna talk to him. Got tired. Anyway, we're going to pull up, and Chris did address this. We're calling it the Palm Springs Convention Center Modernization Project. So you'll see that listed. As Chris was mentioning, there's 3 elements that came out of this. There's the renovation of the building, the expansion of the building, and then the connectivity piece, which we're looking at totaling $25 to $35 million. So these are some of the images that came out of the CSL study: convention, sports, and leisure, outdoor event space. We're looking at indoor-outdoor social area. When you go to a convention now, you know, you can slide the furniture around and have breakouts. People don't convene the way they used to. Local food and beverage, this is a big piece. We are currently out for an RFP for our food and beverage at the convention center, and we're looking at ways that we can bring in our local flavor. How can we bring in some of our really talented restaurateurs? How can we bring in some of our vendors to really sell their wares and show off Palm Springs? Open space learning, digital public art station. We were just talking about some of the digital work that we want to be doing. Next slide. Improved eastern entrance, this is a big one. This is what Chris was talking about, and the bulk of the cost of the expansion, which is rethinking the eastern lawn here, and then the eastern entrance. Currently, it's challenging, and Karen can probably speak more to this, but it's challenging for us to load in and load out 2 conventions at the same time. And you also have to leave the convention center and come in through an exterior entrance to get into Oasis 4, and that's problematic when we're running 2 conventions as well. So that's a big correction. Connectivity, of course, to the east parking, and then the lawn will be looked at to be reprogrammed for saleable space as well. And then Oasis 4 as a multipurpose room, expanding that ballroom capability. That, as I've been told by Conventional Wisdom, that's a big element in market competitiveness. You know, we had the Gaylord just be completed just outside of San Diego. That's a big competitor to us. There's people that would look at us. Gaylord, Scott can probably talk a little bit more about our competitive market, but in order to stay up with that and to keep our convention center competitive, we need to do these improvements. And so thank you for considering the funding here tonight. I wanted to revisit a slide that I just, is there another one coming? That I think some of you might remember. This is the result of the CSL. Why do this? It's an economic development engine, and why am I sitting here tonight with you? Convention centers drive conventioneers to town. They rent hotel rooms, and then they go downtown and spend money, or elsewhere in the community they find great restaurants and go spend money. So as you can see up in the upper left, this was a study that CSL did, and it was looking at doing nothing, meaning we just let the convention center be the way it is. Midterm, which they're calling midterm, which would be the renovation piece, and then the expansion piece is long-term, and it's broken up into 4 pieces. Economic output by industry, employment by industry, fiscal impacts, and hotel industry profits. So you can see, and by the way, what this doesn't show is ahead of this is that the do-nothing scenarios do decrease the potential. We go down because our competitiveness goes down relative to the other places that are keeping up with the convention centers or places like the Gaylord that were just recently built. So this is really a downswing from our current condition. This is the renovation piece, and then this is the long-term piece. So you can see, for example, hotel industry profit at 15.1 million, and you say, well, why do we care about that? Because we get TOT off of that. So as their gross revenues grow, we get TOT. Fiscal impacts, we've got 7.1 million, and these are broken up into the four various sales tax, city sales tax, county sales tax, state sales tax, and city hotel tax collection. This is one that I really like looking at, is the employment by industry. We get 1,200 additional workers out of this project. That's a big, big boost to us in our community and looking at getting workforce going. And then, of course, the economic output by industry is 105 million. I think the total overall over the 20 years was something close to $500 million of economic impact. So this is a critical project for the city and critically important to figure out how to move it forward. So again, thank you for your consideration tonight. I'll pass it over to Chris.
Thank you. And just one thing on this slide too. I think it was Commissioner Newby, if I remember correctly, said, what's in it for us? If we do this project, what's the benefit? You said, what's the benefit? The benefit is that orange bar on the long term is city sales tax collections. So there's a 1% measure J, there's a 0.5% measure D. And then the county is the other piece, that's a 0.5% as well. But you see the long term means maybe $700,000 of additional sales tax income coming our way if this project gets done. And so,
3 million in TOT tax.
and three, yeah, so it's huge.
So that's an annual increase estimated if we're able to get the entire renovation done. And something I want to reinforce that Chris mentioned, and I'm working with all of these design teams, along with Joel and David McAbee, we're trying to figure this project out. We're in what we call phase 0, which is really sorting through the scope of what we're doing. But we have told them, you know, this is the budget. You have to design the budget, you have to deliver us a project, tell us. Now, they're going to ask us to make trade-offs, hard trade-offs, and that's why we work with Scott and Karen and David McAbee and Joel to decide what those trade-offs have to be, but we're thick in it right now. My expectation is that, you know, maybe by next time we meet, we'll have a little bit more information on that, and then certainly by the time we issue debt, we'll be have to have a really good picture on how this renovation is going to go, and then the expansion. So we're sticking to the budget. That's what we have, and the dollars that are outside of the renovation and expansion then go towards the connectivity piece, which is critically important to our downtown businesses as well as our other business districts. So,
Okay, that concludes the presentation, and before I ask Scott to maybe say a few words, the next agenda item is the budget update, so we'll get into, you know, real quickly spend this time over the year-to-date numbers, but we'll get into the long term of this and how you know, if Measure J takes on this debt service, what does it look like for the future of Measure J? So we'll get into that in a minute, but Scott, if you could maybe say a few words, I'd appreciate it. It'd be awesome.
Absolutely. Again, I'm Scott White. I'm with Visit Greater Palm Springs. We're a joint powers authority. We were formed in 1989 by the cities of the Coachella Valley. So we represent all 9 cities. We have a sales team. You met Carolina last time. She oversees the 12 people that sell at the destination. I've been here for 15 years and previously was here in the late 80s, early 90s. From a tourism perspective, I guess I don't need to reiterate, tourism's number 1, 9 billion, 14 million visitors come every year, so it's critically important to our economy. But one of the things that make us a little bit different than a lot of other destinations is we're really, you know, we're dependent on both leisure and group business. Leisure business is very fickle, as I call it. They'll come and go based on what's happening in the world. Group business books in advance, they plan, especially for conventions, and it's really critical for the hotels, the businesses, and so forth. When you look at our particular convention center, we're now competing, this didn't happen, say, 15 years ago, we're now competing with large hotels that can have almost about the same amount of space that we have at our convention center with hotel rooms and so forth, and they're much more competitive in many different ways. So this project, I feel, is critical for many different reasons, which clearly makes us more competitive, and it gives us the ability to not only book more business into the destination, but to change the type of groups that are coming. We've seen a kind of a decrease over the years because the building hasn't been modernized for many different reasons, whether it's technology or aesthetics, whatever it may be. We're starting to lose business to other destinations and other structures like the Gaylord in Chula Vista and so forth, and more of those are coming in the future. I also think, and I'm very excited about the connectivity to downtown. As you all know, if you're in the shade, the summer's not so bad, but if you're not in the shade, it's not a great experience. And so trying to convince a convention to have their meeting here in July and August and having to walk, say, from the Hilton or the Hotel Zozo, whatever it may be, to the convention center is not too appealing. But if that connectivity has shade and experience, both with lighting and art and so forth, I think that's going to give us a competitive opportunity to book more business year-round. So if we have more business year-round, that means that our small businesses, restaurants and so forth are going to have a much greater opportunity to sustain themselves through the summertime. They all work very hard to make as much money as they possibly can during the season, and then you pray that you can hopefully make it through the summer and not lose too much to survive to make it to the fall. So I think this particular project, having that combination of the connectivity, the outdoor space that they're doing, and the modernization is going to help us create more of a year-round experience for our destination. We also work on air service with the airport, so I think this is also going to help us tell the story about year-round service to markets like Chicago and Atlanta and other hub markets that we currently don't have. So we certainly are always trying to grow that, but they want to see the reasons why. So if we can show more group businesses coming in the summertime, more sustainability, more consistency, it's going to help us tell that story as well and give us the opportunity to fly from Chicago to Europe or wherever we're trying to go as a local resident. So there's a benefit both for the residents and for the community as well. So with that, I'll kind of stop there. I feel like we've got a good feeling that we're passionate about this, the importance of it. I think the numbers pencil out. And I think I've worked with Convention Sports and Leisure. I was in Phoenix and in San Antonio. They both did the convention center studies there as well. They're very conservative with their numbers. So I think these are actually low in terms of the long-term aspirations of what they're projecting. I think they're going to be even far greater. I prefer it that way, but I think they do a good job with that. They really know this market. They know the industry. And Conventional Wisdom, who you've hired as well, I think obviously been around for 30 years. They understand the market. So I think the city's done a great job of getting the right professional players in place to look at the data, look at the analysis, and to come up with a game plan that makes sense, but is also conservative in nature. It's not, I don't think it's been overambitious.
Thank you, Scott. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
And also, I'm going to put her on the spot. I'm going to ask Karen to come up. She's our new, Karen, can you kind of come up to the table, please? And she's our new convention center general manager. So I just want to give her an opportunity to say whatever she wants to say about the project. And we welcome her here, and we thank you for being here, and we're looking forward to working with you for sure.
Well, thank you, and I'm so glad to be here. We were very excited. I have our whole director team here. Our finance director, our Christy Dory is our director of events. Joseph Jency is our director of sales. So we travel in a pack because we're so excited about this. But I think one of the things too is we also, as a business and as good stewards of your building, we listen to our clients, and this is something they very much want and need. And it's to not only grow for us to bring in new business, but for their own shows to grow. You know, if they have more meeting rooms, they can do more breakout sessions, they can grow their business, and that's really critical for a place, you know, that has a destination like Palm Springs, because they definitely want to come to Palm Springs. They love Palm Springs. I have never met so many conventioneers that want to move here. It's like, it's a thing. So it's pretty funny to do a study to see how many people who live here came at a convention. So we're just really, we know we're on the right track, and to what Scott said, you have the right people in play, you have the right consultants. I've worked with the architect you hired is LMN, and I've worked with them in 4 other buildings, and they've done superior jobs. So again, really a good plan in place and conservative. So I think that helps a lot too.
Thanks, Karen.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Just so for the commissions, where Joel Montalvo's on Zoom. So if we have, we want to put him to work tonight. No, I'm just kidding. My point of that is, I think we'll stop. We'll let the commission ask some questions before we dig hard in the numbers, because I think Scott's here, Karen, Wayne. So I just kind of want to pause before we go to the next agenda item and give the commission an opportunity to ask anything about what you've seen so far, the project itself, So I'll just open it up. And Joel, I've mentioned Joel because if there's any construction that we can't answer, Joel can answer. His team's going to oversee the architects and the owner's rep for the project. So with that, I'll pause and leave it up to you, Chair.
Commissioners, any questions? Paul?
Okay, so what's the duration of the work in the first phase?
So one of the things we've challenged our team with is we have to stay open, we have to stay open fundamentally for the current debt issuance. So there's
Right.
laws that require us to remain open and generate lease revenue. So setting that aside, we have to keep the film festival running. And we have a major client that's about 30% of the book that comes in the spring. So those two are really the ones that we're really looking out with. We're working hard with Karen's team to understand what's coming up. Our hope is that we can get some preliminary work done in September, October, and then again every summer. The renovation would continue, and then the expansion would kind of be built underneath it, or timelines, and we hope to have it all done by 2028. The urban plan will be finishing up probably early spring of '27, along with the branding marketing plan. Then it goes to Joel's shop to do engineering design, and we're hoping to then build out at least a pilot demonstration, which will be identified during that process in late '27 and into '28. So I'm sure Joel will correct me if I got any of that wrong, but it's about a 3-year time frame, and hopefully by the end of '28.
And along that time, those lines, when we do a debt issuance like this, tax exempt, we have to spend the dollars within 3 years, or a majority of the dollars within 3 years. So, and not that that's the driving factor, we want to get this done, but that is part of what we keep in our back of our mind for this project.
So I have a follow-up to that then. Assuming it's about 3 years and conventions book several years in advance normally, are you already in the market based on the work that's going to happen, or when does that happen? When do you go to the market and see? So we're making an assumption here that we're going to get a lot of new business because of this.
Sure.
Have you begun to test that with your clients or potential clients?
Yeah, just leading up to this project, they have done surveys with clients. They have, CSL, who's the major consultant on the background, has done all of that kind of surveying. And they also look at the history of what has happened in other markets when you build this into the convention center or do that, et cetera. So they have some great data that really supports it. And then knowing our client base as well is supportive of it. That's really what's.
But we're not selling the expansion yet.
We're not selling the
Okay.
expansion yet because we don't have the final plan and what that looks like yet.
I think
Any other
that,
commissioners with questions?
And this is more for Chris, what's the length of the debt? Sure, what's the term?
It'll be 30 years. Yeah, and 30 years for both. So the city issues debt, and the TID as an entity issues its own debt. So both are 30-year terms.
Okay. And at the same, you're expecting the same rate of contribution for Measure J? Once it declines to the, 3?
Yeah,
I think?
that'll probably go on for
the
the
remainder,
remainder.
sure.
Mhm, yeah.
Okay.
And when we go to the numbers, it is 10 years out. So if Measure J, sales tax explodes, maybe it picks up a little bit more, so we can relieve the general fund of some of those dollars. But or maybe it's the other way around. Maybe we leave Measure J and open, get more funding for projects and, weight down the general fund a little bit more. So we just kept the 4.7 in play for the general fund because that's what we do today.
Okay. And you may get to this when we get to the numbers. You have factored in additional Measure J revenue into the overall Measure J
So
revenue?
we have, but not anything like what we just saw there.
Yeah, it's doing the
So
math. I don't see that there.
It's conservative, just like a lot of finance guys are. We project conservatively, but we feel, pretty strongly that both the general fund and Measure J in its tax capacity is gonna really benefit from this, and that's why we're excited about it.
Any other questions or comments?
I guess one other question related to the convention center. So often the other issue for conventions is hotel rooms and quality of hotel rooms. To what extent do you think that's a factor that needs to be addressed in the future?
I think it's a major factor.
Right.
And so, that definitely plays into it. We also hope, with the renovation, that leads a lot of the neighboring hotels to also look at their projects and come into play with it. But it's a major factor.
Yeah, I'll just add that the council just approved a major overhaul of our TOT incentive program. I've got now 3 products that's coming to market as a result of that. One is the Days Inn up on North Pump Canyon. That's going to be 127 rooms, I think. Redo of that hotel. We've got the Dream coming on board, and that's going to be helpful. But it's driven actual market value. And to Karen's point, I think you've mentioned how many extra rooms we would like to see. I'm also speaking with the Renaissance as well, the Ashford Group, about improving their property as well.
Other commissioners?
And there's no plans to spruce up the parking lot under this? I know we leased that lot, but repaving, repainting, anything?
Excuse me, Commissioner, are you talking about the west-facing lot or the east lot? Because the west lot is the one.
The big lot.
The big lot, the big lot.
That's the east lot.
Okay.
I think there are some improvements planned, probably lighting and some shade structure. There's some improvements
There
there.
would be something.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't think it'll be a major overhaul. You know, that 20, 25 years, maybe 30 years from now, that's viewed as sort of the next generational expansion of the convention center and maybe a hotel. So it'll still remain a parking lot, but yeah, there's some improvements happening there based on what is needed by our clients. And
Definitely look at that.
Any other questions, comments? I have a couple. One that reflects my naivety about this project. Has the city considered selling naming rights to the convention center?
I'm gonna chair. I don't know if maybe Karen can answer that
I was
question.
going to say, I'm sure during the process of OVG is the management company that oversees the convention center, and that's something they do for other buildings as well. So it's something that they could definitely look at doing if that's the way the city would like us.
Which might significantly alter the financials. Right. Second question is a little bit more based on, I think, my belief that a number of the residents of the city of Palm Springs have viewed Measure J as a way for them to get funding for projects that are of particular importance to them. And so in fiscal year 25-26, we had 52 applications for over $25 million I think more than $39 million of funding. With the convention center and with the $9 million a year that Joel receives from us for paving the roads of the city, that is currently more than 50% of the budget of Measure J, which does not leave anything essentially for community-initiated projects. And so I think that in addition to selling this commission on the importance of the convention center to the economy, we need to sell the importance of it to the citizens of Palm Springs. Because without that, there's going to be people wondering, why are we paying so much in taxes for something that we don't see the benefit for? So that's just my own personal view.
Chair, I appreciate that comment, and absolutely, I agree with you. I'm a citizen in Palm Springs. I want to know and understand how our dollars are being spent. You know, my job is to help assist get those revenue dollars up so we can provide a good quality of life in our town. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I've heard anywhere between $950 to $1,500 is the average spend of a conventioneer. So imagine that if we could increase our volume of conventioneers, they're going to be spending that much more money in our community, which will generate more sales tax and help us do a lot more of those community-based projects. I agree with you completely, though. We want to ensure that our citizens are comfortable with how we're moving forward.
Any other questions or comments?
Just to add on to that, just for the commission's awareness, we did a study a couple years ago that said for every tax dollar, 60 cents comes from an out-of-state or out of the valley, out of Palm Springs visitor. So we know that the tourism drives an increase in revenue, and the more tourism we have here, the more that number might go up. So it's an important number it's important to know that, you know, for sales tax, that number is largely driven by our tourism industry.
Well, I thank you all for coming. I appreciate the presentation and look forward to working with you in the future.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you all.
Commissioners.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Chris? Can you do it in 15 minutes?
Yes, I can. No, let's not, let's keep, we want to spend as much time on this as we possibly can. So the numbers, and we'll go, just one, before I get to sort of the long-term view, which is where I'm going to spend most of my time tonight, I do want to update the commission on page 5 of the budget pages, which is our sales tax slide. And I like to show this because it's positive. I probably wouldn't spend a lot of time off of it if it was negative. But it's just a good story to continue to show. You know, when we received our March numbers for January sales, you know, they might have been down a little bit, but we think there might have been some timing differences between the December and January numbers because December was so high and January came in negative. So there might have been some flip-flops, some timing differences. But overall, year to date, we're almost 6% up. And I think that's really important to note, you know, especially when we see these numbers and we talk about how conservatively I've grown revenue in my forecast. You know, it's important to know 6% is a big change. You can see it's, you know, it's $600,000, $700,000. That's a project, you know. So, you know, we keep on growing like this, and we ended the year. If we can end the year at 6%, that's going to put our Measure J sales tax revenue well over $22 million. So that's just something I like to continue to focus on and continue to update the commission on because it's a good story this year for sure. So we'll go back to page 1 and we'll just quickly looking at the actuals, the very first column. You can see the $12.38 million in sales tax, the $870,000 in income. So we got revenue of just over $13.2 million. And I'm not going to go down the list of the projects. I do want to go down to sort of where it has the $9.55 million. So that's the amount of dollars we've spent so far year to date on capital projects. So it's a bigger number than historically, and we expect it to grow. You know, if you've been by Demuth Park, Measure J supporting a couple of big projects in Demuth Park, and it's the pickleball courts and it's the dog park renovations and parking lot renovations. You know, we're putting about $15 million total into Demuth Park. And Measure J is a big supporter, a large supporter of those dollars. So we're happy to see those construction projects going well, and a lot of these dollars that you're seeing here is going toward those couple of projects. So that's all I'll say. And then let's move on to the forecast because I think that's what we're all interested in. So when we talk about this forecast, these are not numbers that are set in stone. This is what I have put together. It's not even a recommendation. It's just showing, you know, what can happen in the future. So when we get to approving the next 2-year budget, which will be this time next year, maybe a few months ago this time next year, then we'll talk a little bit more about what the commission wants to do. Do we want to continue to spend the $9 million on streets? Do we want to continue with community? You know, these are commission decisions and recommendations that will go to council. So I just want to stress that, you know, while I may move some of the streets money around, that may not be what the commission does. So, you know, it'll be, you know, what we decide to do at that point in time. So I'm going to concentrate more on this, on the annual expenses on down. So if we look at fiscal year 27 and 28, so it's the fourth column over, the first light green column. And I'm going to go to this year because the budget for 26 and the budget for 27 is set. So those numbers are approved. Those numbers are what's going to happen. So when we get to 27, 28, you know, what does it look like, and when does the convention center debt sort of start coming into play? So so right now we are locked on the downtown revitalization debt. You know, that $50 million, I believe it was $50 million, you know, is ongoing, and that continues to go till fiscal year 34-35. We're also locked on the library and swim center debt. So that the $2.32 million in that first light green column, that is the debt service for the construction of the library, which was $43 million. There's debt and cash. As you know, Measure J is contributing $8 million in cash to that project, as well as funding the debt service. And then the other items that will come into play in these future years is a new Fire Station 1. We know whenever that it's decided where that fire station is going to go and how much we want to spend on a fire station, we will be coming back to the commission in hopes of getting that financing of the fire station done by Measure J. So we've got it, again, we've got it in the budget, I've got it in my forecast, these are not set in stone. And then in fiscal year 28-29, the convention center debt starts to come into play. So this is paying on the first phase and then part of the second phase as well. So we start out in fiscal year 28 and 29 with a little bit over 2 million. So 2,055,000 is what we're looking at for the first year of debt service for the convention center. And you can see that grows 3.6 million to 5.2 for a few years. And then when we pay off the downtown revitalization debt and when the general fund starts kicking in some dollars, it levels out to 3.245 million for the rest of the years of the debt service. So what does that mean? You know, because if we do, if the commission does recommend to take on fire station debt, that's 2.5 million as well. So we're looking at, in addition to what we've got locked and loaded today with the with the downtown revitalization and the library swim center, we're looking at least a minimum of an additional 4.5, and in some cases almost $7 million of additional debt service that we will pay for a convention center and fire station. So what does that mean? So what's left over for capital projects is that line that says $3 million. So there's still money left over to support projects. I've still got $500,000 in that bottom line for overruns. So again, these are just things I've put in here. We don't have to have a $500,000 budget for overruns. The $3 million in projects is what they will be. So it's still a good amount of money left over for projects, and we're supporting some really beneficial projects to the city and the convention center. And just along that line, the convention center project is sort of looked at almost like the downtown revitalization project, where we feel that this city is really benefiting from that revitalization right now in the form of TOT. And so we think that the convention center project, when completed, is going to provide sort of that kind of benefit to the city as well. I mean, we appreciate our libraries and our fire stations and our swim centers, but these projects have real economic impact. And so I think it's a very good use of Measure J dollars to be able to support these projects that have really good impact to the city and really mean long-term, more dollars that are going to come in. So going down, and I'll concentrate on the first light green column. I'm going to go down to what does the surplus and deficit look like and the fund balance look like when we start introducing convention center debt. So if we go down to surplus deficit, which is the fourth row from the bottom, in the first year we run a surplus of 2.275 million. And you can see what happens as we go through the years. We do run a couple of deficits. Again, that's with $3 million of additional projects. So we're using up fund balance, which, in my opinion, a fund like Measure J shouldn't carry a large fund balance. These dollars should be into the community. So, as we think about the budget in the future, if you look at the couple years, of 4.39 million in fiscal year 29 and 30, and 3.66 million, that's our projected ending fund balance. Do we want to, take some of that money and use it for projects? So we're not constrained to just $3 million in additional projects. There is money in that fund balance to use if the commission desires to use it. So, yeah, we run a couple of deficits because we've got some bigger debt service numbers for the convention center. But if you look at the fund long term, once we get to the dark green column of 34, 35, and even before that, we start to see the real numbers really bounce back. And again, keep in mind, this is only with the projection of a couple percentage points of revenue growth over this time period. We're going to grow maybe at 6% this year. You throw a couple percentage points on top of that, these numbers, you probably don't run these deficits that are projected. So this is conservative, and we should keep that in mind. But again, I want, when we look at the fiscal years 29-30 and 30-31, which is sort of the middle light green columns, and we look at that streets number where it goes from $9 million to $6 million to help fund some of the debt service that we're going to pay. Again, that's not something that's, set in stone. Maybe we don't go to 6 million. Maybe we use some fund balance and the streets budget goes to 7-8 million. Maybe we don't do a 1 year or 2 years of community-initiated projects, because we know we've got a lot of money still sitting in our community-initiated project bucket. And we're going to fund, if you see that line, we're going to put $2, $3, $4, $5 million in that bucket again over the next 3 or 4 years. So, these are all things that as we go through each 2-year budget, the commission can consider of how we want to, move the funds around. But just to sort of finish this up, and I'd be more than happy to take any questions from all the commission members. This is what we're projecting right now. So the Measure J fund is looking to support, $40 million, $50 million plus of this convention center project. Of the city's projected $97 million in debt service. So I think when it's all said and done, Measure J gets somewhere around $60 million. The general fund picks up about 35, 40 million. So, and then of course the TID picks up about 40 million as well. So with that, I'll be more than happy to take any questions. Again, this is, we're not asking the commission for a recommendation tonight. We want the commission to digest the numbers. We'll even come back next meeting, we'll agendize this again, and we will, if you'll have time to look over the numbers, time to ask more questions next week or next month. The intention is to ask the commission for a recommendation to support the convention center debt next month. But if the commission chooses to push that off, then we can push it off for another month. I wouldn't recommend pushing it off for too much longer, but because we want, when we go to the council to ask for their authorization to issue debt, we want to be able to give them the commission's recommendation at that time. So with that, I'll pause and be more than happy to take any questions on the numbers.
Thank you, Chris. Commissioners? Vice Chair Kravitz.
Our interest income's already up about 120 grand over projections from last year. Does that just roll in, any excess roll into the next year's budget?
No, but it falls to the bottom line. So it's probably going to come in at about $1.5 million this year. So it just increases what we've budgeted for our fund balance by that amount of money.
Okay, so we don't lose it?
No, absolutely not. And the reason, we should point out, the reason why we're getting more than a lot more than what I projected is because if you look at that very first blue column, that $54 million number at the top, that is essentially the fund's cash position. And so, as we spend these dollars down, and we want to spend these dollars down, but we know we're getting some benefit to our money as we, if that money's just sitting there, it's not just sitting there, we're getting some, interest on it. So that's helping to build the fund balance as well.
So your conservative projection right now, we're probably going to double what we estimate?
I think this is just the first 2 quarters. The third quarter hadn't been posted yet by the time I ran these numbers. So we're expecting another 400,000 again in the third quarter. So I think we'll see around 1.4 to 1.5 when it's all said and done.
All right. Any other commissioners have questions?
Just a comment. Chris, thank you for doing this. This is very valuable.
And again, just encourage the commission to look these over, digest, and I'll be more than happy to take questions next month as well. So just encourage you to look at it. I have shown this to I believe a majority of the city council, and so we numbers are what they are, but we're more than happy to answer any questions next month, and we'll be more than happy to, when we get into the next 2-year budget, we want to keep these in mind. So the next 2-year budget, this time next year, we'll probably be approving it and recommending to council. So We've got 12 months to think about this, and yeah.
Commissioners, any other questions?
Well, we can probably talk about it next month, but I just see that for the street repairs, which we know our citizens love to engage on that topic, we take a big haircut starting in 2030, and I'm just wondering how realistic that haircut would be.
Well, we do have other funds that support street repairs. So Measure A, which is a half-cent sales tax that runs through the county essentially, does also support street repairs, and we've used those dollars. I think we used those dollars this year? Yes, this year, to get us up to that $9 million level. So that could be what we do. Again, we have a pretty healthy fund balance even in some of these years where we could choose to spend that money down, which actually is my recommendation. Is we don't need to keep $2, $3, $4 million of fund balance in this fund. Let's get the money out there in the community and spend it. So we could choose that option too. So while if we had to spend $6 million, it certainly wouldn't be what we want to do. I think there's things that we can do, to maybe bring that number up to something like $9 million.
Okay. Yeah, I just think it's really good marketing for Measure J, just because people are so engaged.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
they notice it, right? If the streets look terrible, people feel it. So.
I know Joel right now is nodding his head and saying, yes, you're right.
That was, my question was, I noticed the end of this fiscal year, there's a $4 million fund balance, yet the others are in the 9 to 12 million. What's the thought behind maintaining that kind of fund balance?
Well, if you go to the second line from the bottom, that restricted for airport projects number, so that's a significant part of the very bottom line. So we should keep that in mind when we're looking at the fund balance. It's split into what is unrestricted for future Measure J projects, and it's also part of it restricted for the airport, which we are required to do by an FAA ruling. So, again, I think, having these high fund balances, we don't have to. We can spend this money down. And it's, again, these are just some of the projections that, I've put in here, and something to think about when we get to the next 2-year budget.
Other comments, questions? Thank you, Chris. Next item on the agenda, item number 9, public comment, non-agenda items. Any public comment, non-agenda items?
Yes. David Hines?
Again, 3-minute limit. Thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners. Wanted to follow up on a topic that was brought up last meeting. As Chair Sipkin had mentioned earlier, this relates to the loan forgiveness, $100,000 for the loan to the Public Arts Commission for the installation of those wonderful art pieces. I was there on Friday to watch the one in Baristo get put together. Fascinating to observe. But I have some problems with loan forgiveness, and I spoke at the Public Arts Commission as well. I don't believe that's a prudent idea. I think it sets a bad precedent. I would rather see the loan repaid, as I expressed to the Public Arts Commission. If they need more time to repay that loan, they certainly could come and ask for more time. The way I look at that is that would be giving away $100,000 of taxpayer money that really isn't required. I know Chair Armstrong offered signage for that $100,000. I believe we're talking about 6 pieces in total. I looked online, get a beautiful stone sign for about $800, last 50 years. I don't see how that equates 8 of those, or 6 of those at $800, how that $5,000 equates to a giveaway of $100,000. I'm just having a hard time understanding. But again, I think it's prudent to just have the loan repaid. Again, this is a slippery slope if we start forgiving. There's other loans in place, and I would hate to see us start forgiving there. As has been pointed out this evening, we're going to be looking for every $100,000 we can find to support community-initiated projects. So I appreciate you discussing it with Chair Armstrong further, but I don't think that's a wise use of Measure J money. Certainly if they need more money for future installations, they can come back for additional loans. Why would we want to loan to somebody in the future that isn't repaying the loans? That just doesn't seem like prudent business practice. But thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Any other?
No, we didn't.
Thank you. Last item on the agenda, Staff and Measure J Oversight Commission member items and requests. Any? Mr. Kravitz.
I'll be quick, since I didn't speak about my projects. One of my oversight projects is near completion on April 30th. I believe it's a Thursday at 10 a.m. The Eisenhower Infusion Center project is going to be done. Doing a ribbon cutting, so you're all invited to it. Melissa gave me some signs to bring, so I need some cheerleaders to help. They're also putting a permanent, like a steel plaque that has a Measure J Commission being thanked on there. So it's 10 a.m., April 30th, Eisenhower Infusion Center at 1111 Tockwitz. That's it. Thank you.
I was going to mention that exactly. Also, I would like to let the commission know that one of the organizations that we were able to fund last year, the Boys and Girls Club, is having a fundraiser that you don't have to fund, but you can attend, called Tacos and Tequila.
Tacos and tequilas.
Tacos and Tequila, and I ask Melissa if she could please send out, again, a reminder that you're all invited to attend that. It is going to be at the Hidden Estate, which is the old, whose house
Clark
was it?
Gable.
The old Clark Gable house on West Chino Drive in Palm Springs. So we'll get that notice out, and you're all invited to attend. With
Can
that, I have
can
nothing
follow up on
further.
that? Yeah.
Yes.
Can I follow up on that?
Sure.
Yeah, as you know, my wife's on the board, so I know more about the Boys and Girls Club than probably any organization. It's not a hard pitch, but I think you'd really appreciate the work they do if you could hear from actual students, young people who use it. It's a great event, and I've been to a lot of events in my lifetime, but you really do learn about how valuable that organization is to this community. So,
One last item before I move, or ask for a motion to adjourn. Unfortunately, I will not be in attendance next month because I am going to be going to my oldest grandchild's graduation from USC. I'll be in LA on May 14th and 15th. So if you guys want to proceed with considering this budget at the May meeting, that's fine. If not, I will be here in June. Okay. Thank you all. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
so move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, we are adjourned. Thank you all for coming. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Why, are you not here?
Together